Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Salesforce Ben LinkedIn Live collaboration. So you tired of receiving frantic messages from users about Salesforce mishaps? From login issues to deleted opportunities, these common frustrations often stem from a lack of understanding of the platform, but fear not. In this session, we'll equip you with all the tips and tricks you need to train your Salesforce users effectively. So while we wait for everyone to join, let us know where you're logging in from today. We always love to see what a global audience we have attending. Okay, let's get started. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. My name is Zaina Dar, and I'm the events content producer at Salesforce Ben, and I'll be your host for this event. I'm really excited to introduce you to Stacey O'Leary, Salesforce consultant, trainer, and 5-time certified Salesforce administrator, who's here with us today to share her expertise on training Salesforce users effectively. Stacey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Zaina, first for having me, and to the whole Salesforce Ben team. This is my very first LinkedIn Live ever, so it's very exciting. Nice. And this month is my year 5 anniversary of writing blogs for Salesforce Ben and Salesforce content. So I've been doing that for a long time. I do Salesforce consulting, spoken at Dreamforce a couple times. So lots, very knee deep in the Salesforce universe.
Great, thank you. So before we get started, just a few house rules. So as this is a webinar, all lines are muted, but don't worry, we'll be having a Q&A at the end for you to ask Stacey any burning questions you may have. So feel free to submit the questions in the comments throughout the webinar. The webinar will also be recorded and will be available on our Salesforce Ben LinkedIn and YouTube channel, just in case you need to drop off or would like to share it with your colleagues. Amazing. Well, I'll hand it over to you, Stacey, to take us through the presentation, and I'll see you at the end for the Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Zaina. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Like Zaina said, we're going to be talking about how to train your Salesforce users so you don't have to spend so much time answering those basic questions and really get to focus on what you need to do as the Salesforce admin. So I've introduced myself a little bit, so I'll skip right past this one. We're going to jump right into the first thing you need to know for training users is you need to know your users. And it's really hard for users when they're learning Salesforce because they can't tell you what they don't know. There's a common phrase I'm sure you've heard that goes, you don't know what you don't know. Well, users don't know what they don't know, except for the fact that they don't know how to use Salesforce. This is where your homework comes in as a trainer. You have to find out what they don't know and what they need to know. There's a big difference in how you're going to train someone with a couple years of Salesforce experience in your org or someone who's never even heard of Salesforce before. So it's really important to find out how much of Salesforce they know already and sort of what their experience level is before you start. That way you're not wasting their time or your own time. And then the next most important thing with training Salesforce users is that they should be the ones that are clicking in Salesforce, that are doing things. So what you may notice through this presentation is the slides are pretty bland. There's not a lot that is in here. Like I wish there was a chart or some sort of data point or something that I could show you that says, this is how you train people. But it's really doesn't work like that. People's brains learn best by doing something, not really by reading about doing something. So if you think about when you learned to drive a car, or if you're learning to cook, You don't learn those things by reading the driver's handbook or by reading a recipe. You learn it from practical hands-on experience. And that is going to be the most important part of training Salesforce users, is that hands-on experience, and not any kind of slide or presentation or anything that you're going to be sharing with your users. So since we've established that slides are not really going to help when you're training users, what is? So it's your sandbox. This is where you're going to spin up a developer sandbox, maybe a Trailhead org if you don't have one, something where your users can go wild and click on things and try things and do everything that they are going to need to do in their roles working in Salesforce. And this is where it comes in that it's so important that you know what they are going to have to do in Salesforce. So you don't want to be training a customer support team on managing opportunities. And likewise, you're probably not going to be training a sales team on how to manage the case object. So knowing what they need to do, setting up that sandbox and getting them in there and getting them hands-on is going to be the best way to train your users. And this next point is preparing a lesson plan. This is going to be probably the hardest and the most amount of work that you're going to have to do with training your users. So I mentioned opportunities and cases and customer support. What you're going to want to do is set up records that they can work on. You do not want to get into that developer sandbox, see that there's no records in there, and spend half of your training time making fake support cases. That's not a good use of time. So what you need to do is prepare lots of practice records, lots of them, so that you have probably 5 to 10 practice records for each task per user. And then you're going to set up some trainer reports. This is how you're going to know if they're actually doing what they need to be doing during the training session and not multitasking. Because we want them to learn these skills. They're taking time out to learn. You're taking time out to teach. It's important that they focus and do those skills so that they can leave that session prepared. And setting up your reports in Sandbox is a really good way to do that and to see quickly all of the people that you're training if they've completed the task that you've set for them. For example, if you want them to close, 3 cases each, then you could have your report prepared and ready that shows the number of cases that have been closed per user. And you can just monitor that instead of, walking around and looking at everyone's screen or just having them raise their hands to see if they have completed the task or not. And the next one is sort of, I think, a better tip for if you're not doing an in-person training, which most of us are doing things online these days. So along with not sharing slides, it's probably not going to help you. You demoing your Salesforce screen and clicking around, that's also probably not going to help them very much. So what I do is all of my users are prepared and I let them know we're going to alternate screen sharing. So I walk them through the task that they're doing, and then they are sharing their screen. So that way I know everyone's on task and working on what they need to be working on. And then we take turns. If you're only training one person, that's great. Have them share their screen. But again, you showing is not going to be as impactful as them doing the work and clicking and actually going through things and practicing those skills. That will help build muscle memory and knowledge retention so that they're able to leave your session with what they need to do their jobs. Okay, and I know documentation is such a huge thing in the Salesforce community, and it is super important. One of those things is training guides, and so a lot of people will get very concerned about creating, a training library or, putting things in your Confluence about how to do things in Salesforce. And those are good and they're necessary, but they're not the best way to train your users. So for my hierarchy of training, Number one, the best way to train people is going to be live, real time. You're going to learn immediately what they already know how to do. If they're doing things incorrectly, maybe they're doing something wrong or they're doing something the hard way and they don't even know there's an easier way to do something. So that live training is going to give you the ability to modify what you're doing and what you're teaching to what they actually need. Another big thing with live training is that managers of teams often know what they want their teams to be doing, but they don't know exactly what people are clicking on every single day. They might be a little bit removed from the actual everyday work that their team is doing. And if you let your users drive, if you let them click, you're going to see that. You're going to find out. You're going to be able to train them properly or go back to the manager and say, hey, I know you want your people to close cases this way, but this is what's actually set up here. Do we need to do some kind of different training? Can we modify Salesforce? Do we need to change the process? That's all going to come out of your live training. Second best, if you can't do a live training every time, I love video guides. So just recording yourself doing the live training, or even if you're just doing a Zoom and record yourself, like updating an opportunity, anything like that is going to be really helpful for your users, and it's going to step them through what they need in real time. So very similar to the way we look up how to do things on YouTube, and most people prefer that to like reading a step-by-step guide. Those video recordings are going to be your second best option. After that, your training documents and your user guides, those are still important. They're still necessary. Still got to do them. Those are going to help people who don't like the video and who need resources when you're not immediately available. And that's also something that you can refer people to if you've already trained them. So if you have someone who's already completed a live training and they've forgotten some portion of it, or they just need a refresher, you can refer them to the exact document that they need, and that will really help. And then finally, worst case scenario is going to be just verbally telling someone, hey, go click on this, go click on that, or sending an email. That's really not going to be the ideal on how to train someone. It will work in a pinch, and we all do it when we need to, because it's the fastest. But if you really want to train your users, sitting down with them live is going to be the best way to do that. All right. And finally, you're probably not going to be able to teach every single person every single thing that you want them to learn. Even in a live training, it's not going to be perfect every single time. The most important thing you want to train your users on is how to get help. The biggest thing I see with users is that they assume that what they're doing is the right way because that's how they learned it, or that whatever they're doing that has a problem, it can't be fixed. So they don't even bother asking for help. So it's really important to train your users to say like, hey, I'm here. These are the other resources that are available to you. If you get stuck, if you get this problem, if you get this error message, here's how you fix it. And giving them those resources, whether you have an internal email alias, whether it's on a Slack message, whatever method you want for people to reach out to you for help, give them that information, because so many people just won't reach out for help, or they don't know what to do when they get stuck. That is really important. And that's what's going to help you to resolve things quicker in the future as well. And I know that's not a super long presentation, but I think there's a lot in there that's really helpful. I hope it helps you learn how to train users and gives you some tips and what you can do to make your training more effective. And I do training as well. So if you need training, or if you are looking for someone to set up curriculum or train your team, you can email me, info@quicklyconsulting.com, and we can work on it together.
Hello. Well, thank you so much for that really insightful presentation, Stacey. I hope our audience now feels much better equipped to tackle the challenges of training Salesforce users effectively. So now it's time for our Q&A. So if you have any questions for Stacey, please feel free to submit them in the comments below and we'll try to get around to as many as possible. Okay, let's see, what do we have here? Let me just remove the deck. Okay, there we go, center stage. So Ashley is asking, how do you manage multiple logins to a sandbox? One issue we have is that it would be too many people testing things at one time.
Oh, sure. So I think the biggest thing you can do is identify the purpose of the sandbox and not put everybody all in the same sandbox at the same time. So hopefully you have a few different developer sandboxes that you can spin up and have people start in their developer sandbox and do their building and testing in there. And then migrate things to like a partial or a full copy sandbox. That way people are not stepping on each other's toes. Same thing with training brand new users. Do not put them in your sandbox where you're doing your testing for new features. Probably not going to be your full copy or your partial because you're doing testing and they might bump up against a feature that's not even live in production yet. So I would definitely make use of all of the different developer sandboxes that are available.
Okay, great, thank you. So I feel like there are always a few users who want to reject the new system from the beginning. How do you deal when users have a bit of a negative attitude towards Salesforce?
Oh, that's such a huge problem. And it happens everywhere. I don't know why. People are resistant to change, and that's a totally normal human thing. Things that are new are weird and different. And I assume that because I don't know it, it's not good. And when I get people like that, I try to spend one-on-one time with them and actually have them drive and say, hey, look at this, look at that. I had a sales VP once tell me that Salesforce was horrible. He didn't know why they bought it. It didn't work. And when I sat down live and I said, show me your screen, show me what's not working, he would search for like an opportunity and he wouldn't be able to find it. And he assumed that it was broken. And the problem was that their search settings had not been customized. Like he wasn't getting all the right columns in his search results. So he assumed it was broken. It wasn't broken, just no one had ever asked what he needed and set anything up. And, you know, I just modified like the search results column and he thought it was just the greatest thing ever. So it's just getting individual time with them and getting them to log in and tell you specifically what the problem is. And sometimes those people will just grumble and be like, I don't have time for that. And all you can do is just reach out and say, hey, I have time for you. Your company decided to invest in the tool. This is what we're going to do. And you need to be successful at it, and just keep reaching out and hopefully sort of it will work out for the best.
All right, great. Okay, so how would you manage the following case? So working in a consulting company and you receive an already set up Salesforce and part of the job is managing the space, but constantly receiving requests from the client that are not aligned with what they have developed previously.
Okay, so this is pretty much every client that I work with, because as a consultant, I work with lots of different clients. And what's really important is you set up those expectations from the beginning. When I come into an existing org, one of the first things I ask is am I here to change what you've already done, or am I here to support what you've already done? And if you're not there to change anything, to just train and maintain the system that they have now, then any requests for change that you get are going to be pushed back. And so you can say, actually, part of our consulting agreement is we're not changing existing processes. They can work that out internally if they do want to change something. But really, it's okay as a consultant for you to push back and say, hey, that's not part of our agreement, or that's not covered in what we're working on. If it is, if you are there to change things for a client, organization is super important, and having sort of a single point of contact a single person that's approving the things that are sent to you. So whether it's like a task managing tool like Asana or Basecamp or something, getting those change requests in and having somebody on their side say, okay, consultant, this is what we want you to work on this week. Here's what our users are requesting. Because as a consultant, you're not an employee there. You don't work there. You may not have all the information about what their business plan is or how they plan on growing. So you need someone on the inside to be that sort of stopping point and say, hey, okay, I know our users are requesting X, Y, and Z, but that doesn't align with our business plan. So we're only going to send request X to our consultant.
Fab. Okay, let's see. What is the best video or screen recording tool?
I being a consultant, I just use whatever my clients have. So anything that can record your screen, video, and audio at the same time, I think is fine. I've used Zoom Info in a pinch. I've used Loom, like QuickTime on a map. Anything like that will work as long as you can get a live recording with your face on it. People like faces. They learn well from other people. If you can just get audio and screen recording, that's fine too. But anything that will make a recording that you can store and save and share with people, that's great.
Okay, nice. So do you usually direct people to Trailhead?
Depends on the people and what I want them to learn. The only time I will direct people to Trailhead is if I don't have time to train them live, or with some clients, the training is not included as part of their SOW. Then I will just go ahead and say like, hey, here's these, training modules that I recommend for Trailhead. But I see a lot of people on LinkedIn and online just saying like, oh, go to Trailhead. You'll learn Salesforce, and there's so much in there and it's so easy to get lost that I don't like to just tell people just go to Trailhead. You've really got to be more specific than that.
Yeah, great advice. So what do you do when people ask questions you don't have the answer to?
That's a good one, because I don't think anyone ever has the answer to everything all of the time. It's important to just be honest and say, hey, I don't have the answer to that. But then you sort of want to think about if it's something that you think is possible, if it's something that you think you can find the answer to. If you've been a Salesforce admin a while, you probably have your favorite resources online to go look for how to do things or answer questions that you don't have the answer to right away. And you always want to be upfront with your users. You never want to overcommit, or say that you know how to do something or give an answer that you're not sure is correct. So, be upfront, say, hey, I don't know how to do that, but I will find out for you, or I will see what I can do.
Yeah. Honesty is the best policy. So what if your users are resistant to training? I suppose you've touched on this as well, or if they think they know everything, or they're resistant to change, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is we used to do this different at my other company. Yes, nobody does everything exactly the same in all Salesforce orgs. Every org I get at least one person saying, well, we did it this way at my other company. I'm sure it was great and it worked perfect. This is the org that you have now, and this is the resources that you have now. That person may have come from somewhere with a huge Salesforce team, and then they've moved to an org that has no admin and just a consultant. So talking with those people, I think, is really important live, and asking them for tons of detail about why they're resistant, or the feature that they used to have and how it worked and what they liked about it, because you can get a lot of information from them. You can get really good ideas. You may not be able to implement like a huge code solution, but you can probably pick a few things out that were beneficial, or things that you could implement going forward. And that will really build a lot of trust with that person who's making that request, to show like, hey, we're not going to be able to do that exactly, but we can do some stuff. This Salesforce is very customizable, and we can do a lot to help our users.
Mm-hmm. Great. So anyone just joining, please feel free to leave any questions you have for Stacey in the comments, and we'll try to get around to as many as possible. So what are some common mistakes to avoid when training Salesforce users, and how can they be mitigated?
I think not being prepared is the number one biggest mistake that you can do. It's really, really, and I say this from personal experience, very embarrassing to go into a training thinking that you're training on one thing and finding out that the users already know how to do that and don't actually need training on that at all, and they want something totally different. Very hard to deal with that when you're live and trying to perform a training. So lack of preparation, lack of communication, really hard. Again, I get managers all the time saying, my team doesn't know how to do this, when in fact their team thinks they know how to do it fine. And they're not even on the same page about what they need. So that's really difficult to deal with.
Mm-hmm. What's the scope of upcoming tools and Salesforce releases?
I'm not quite sure I understand that one.
Yeah, okay. If you could clarify, that would be great. So how can Salesforce administrators empower users to become self-sufficient in troubleshooting common issues such as login problems or data errors?
So we talked briefly about teaching your users how to get help. And when I talk about that, I really like to actually pull up the login screen and say, there's this little link right here underneath that says forgot password. You can click on that if you need to. And I also like to show some error messages and say, if you try to create a duplicate, this is what it's going to look like. When you see this error message, here's how you can fix it without me. I like to show them what a validation rule error looks like, because users see a lot of those. And when I write validation rule errors, I like to explain actually in the error message how to resolve it and sort of empower your users that way, and give them the problem when they've done an error, tell them the error, but also tell them the solution at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Cool. How do you customize training programs to align with the specific needs and objectives of different organizations?
So I spend a lot of time, and it's probably, I think, more time than people would think, sort of scoping out what needs to be learned and the current setup of the org. So if I'm coming in just to train like a new sales team or a team that's never used Salesforce before, I am going to spend tons of time with leadership, finding out what the expectations are, what are the users supposed to be doing, what is their current level of training, what has been customized in Salesforce so far, and then coming up with a curriculum that aligns with the things that they need to know without spending time on stuff that they don't need.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, for the people just joining, please feel free to leave your questions in the comments for Stacey. So what are some effective methods for encouraging user adoption of Salesforce after training sessions?
So there's a quote, I don't know where it came from, but it's in the Salesforce world. If it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen. So user adoption is that's just a perfect example of user adoption. The biggest problem I see with user adoption is sales reps not wanting to manage their opportunities or not maintaining their opportunities in Salesforce and just using a spreadsheet. And in that case, what I like to do is set up a list view or a dashboard or something for the manager who's going to be probably having like a weekly call with that person, and just use Salesforce. Don't use your spreadsheet, live in Salesforce. And if the manager pulls up Salesforce and says, hey, your pipeline is only 50,000, it should be 10 million. Why are you not working deals? That's going to be a huge wake-up call. It's really important for leadership to actually require that their users use Salesforce. It's uncomfortable for people who've never done it before. Like I said, something new is always scary and different and hard to learn, but if people don't have to do it, they're not going to want to do it. So you do sort of have to set that management expectation. Like, this is where you manage deals in Salesforce. You don't do it in a spreadsheet. Don't email me like a pipeline update. Just manage your records right in Salesforce. And that's how we measure our pipeline or our case close rate or anything like that. It all needs to be in Salesforce.
Okay. So how do you approach training sessions differently for users with varying levels of Salesforce experience?
I would do either multiple sessions if you can, or set up different join times. So if you have a mixture of, let's say, people who've never used Salesforce before and people who are experienced, but they don't know how to use, like, let's say, a new feature that you've built or something, do, a 1 hour meeting, and the first 30 minutes, just have your brand new users in and just get them in and starting to click on things, and then have a small break in the middle and have your experienced users join so that everyone can learn the new feature together, or do different sessions. I'm sure everyone has had the experience where they've had to sit through a very boring training of something they already know how to do. We do not want to do that. We don't want to waste anyone's time. We want to give them useful material. And definitely, I would split up your groups by their skill level.
Yeah. Based on your experience, what are the typical pain points that Salesforce users face during their initial onboarding process?
Finding things in Salesforce, definitely. It can be a little weird, especially with like Einstein search. Looking for something, you expect to find it in a certain way, you don't find it. And then terminology is a huge one. Every single client I talk to needs a lesson in the difference between leads and contacts. All of them, even the ones that feel like they're experienced in Salesforce. So knowing sort of what they're working on is really going to help you. And those I think are the most common, the leads and contacts and that kind of thing.
Okay, nice. How do you ensure that your training sessions are engaging and interactive to keep users actively involved and interested?
You can do Easter eggs in there. So if you're doing Sandbox with fake data, you can put like Avengers characters, Harry Potter characters as your contact names. You can do like obscure book characters and see who notices. If you're working in a developer sandbox, you can even put like on your lightning pages, like a congratulations rich text component or stuff that's kind of silly that you wouldn't put in production. And that can be a lot of fun. And then just having them drive too is going to keep them engaged rather than them just like staring at a screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in your opinion, what are the essential topics that every Salesforce user should be proficient in, regardless of their role or department?
Number one would be getting help. Everyone who works in Salesforce should know how to get help if they get stuck on something. Everyone should know that just because you don't have to live with something the way it is. So many, many times I get teams, I think I mentioned this, that sort of are annoyed with Salesforce, but they don't ask for help because they assume that there's nothing that you can do, and you can do a lot of stuff can be customized. So I think that's really important.
So how do you tailor your training approach to accommodate different learning styles and preferences among users?
I would, if you can, before the training, find out if the team has a preference, or if you're training, this works really well if you're just training one person. Find out what they prefer and how they learn, because people do have different learning styles and different things will work better for them. So you can just ask. There's no harm in asking. If someone says, hey, I don't do well on camera, right? I just want to do voice, that's fine. Or if I've even had people say like, hey, I'm terrible on Zoom, this needs to be in person. And so you can just ask the user or the team or the manager, what works best for that team, and then work towards that.
Great. So anyone joining, please feel free to leave any questions you have in the comments, and we will get round to them. We'll just give it a few moments just in case there's anybody else who's got anything to ask. But if not, then we'll wrap up the session. Where are you joining from today, Stacey?
I am in Southern California, and it is unseasonably cool here. Usually it's very warm by now this time of spring, but lots of gray, and I'm not used to it. I don't like it.
Yeah, well, I'm in sunny London, so I'm more than used to it. Cool. So I think that's probably it for today. So thank you so much to everyone for attending. We hope that you've gained valuable insights into how to train Salesforce users effectively and overcome common challenges in the process. So feel free to connect with Stacey on LinkedIn if you have any further questions or you need any advice on anything. So I'd like to give a big thank you to Stacey for sharing her expertise and insights with us today. Before we round up, any final words, Stacey?
Well, thank you for having me. This is really fun. A lot of great questions. Thank you for everyone who reached out with questions. And like Zaina said, if there's additional questions or if we didn't get to yours, definitely message me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help.
Great. Well, thank you again to everyone for attending, and we hope to see you again for our next webinar soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.